What is up, Rapid Potential YouTube? Welcome to today's video. Before we get started into cleaning all the metal shavings out of my car, I want to take you guys for a quick tour around the shop. Saw some comments asking about what's happening with the yellow RX8, what's going on with the four-rotor car, all of that stuff. So we're just going to run through all of that stuff super quick, and then we're going to look at my oil filter to see how much oil really just went through and ruined everything in my engine, but not really ruined everything, but required me to do a lot of unscheduled work to my car that was running really good. So, project car update, then we're cleaning oil coolers. I'm going to clean this engine up so I can get it stacked in the next video. First on the list, 4-rotor FD. I've got the Ronin subframe in, engine mounts are built, working on mounting the radiator right now, still waiting on the intake manifold to get built. Once the intake manifold is built, I will run out to Defined Auto Works, pick up the last bits of the stuff, wiring harness, header, all of that, and then we can put this car together and get it done. The rally car, I broke it at the rally. I have a rear axle. I'm going to put that in. Y'all will see this car get fixed probably the week before the rally, and then we'll go race the rally. Nah, we'll skip that one for now. The RX8 blew an oil cooler line, and that's the video you guys are watching right now. We're cleaning the oil cooler out. We're cleaning the oil lines up. We're making new oil cooler lines, and I'm cleaning the engine parts and I'll show you guys all the cool nitty gritty stuff and where all the metal went inside my engine. Letty, you want to come outside? It is a little cold out there. We'll go on an outside adventure to find the other cars that don't exactly get to sit inside. My Cherokee, it's a unit. The LRX8, I've got LS ignition coils coming for it, fresh set of plugs, and in a week or so from whenever this video got uploaded, maybe 10 days, I'm taking this car to Phalanx Performance in St. Louis, also taking their RX7. We're going to be putting both of them on the dyno there, and we're going to be dyno testing a bone stock RX8, changing the spark plugs to brand new, re-dyno testing it, and then comparing revision C coils to LS coils on the dyno, all in one video. And we're going to put the boost controller on the RX7 to make some horsepower. Over here, apologize for the wind. Let me just get in my wind tunnel. This is the hybrid turbo fancy RX8 build that I'm going to do. So I've ordered the manifold, the fancy machined piece that Mazda sells, so we can put the hybrid motor in this engine. I also, when I ordered the parts to rebuild my RX7 engine when it expired unexpectedly, I've got all the parts to stack my hybrid engine. I have a set of RX8 rotors at a local machine shop here that I'd never seen a rotary engine before, but machining an RX8 rotor for RX7 apex seals is pretty simple. So when I get the rotors back from the machine shop, I'll be able to put RX7 apex seals in my Renesis engine with my custom turbo manifold with a big old turbo on here, and we're going to try to make some jam on the Renesis and see how many plastic intake manifolds we can explode. The black right-hand drive FD, I just have to finish the 4-rotor and then I'm getting started on this. So there's a lot of, RX7 blew up unexpectedly, pushed my hybrid Renesis project out a little bit because it's a me project. 4-rotor's not done, which means I can't start on the black FD yet. That one's just getting the really trick single turbo REW. Also, the Caddy Max tow rig, I know I've got some truck guys here. ZF6, 6-speed, Duramax, Cadillac swapped, dually. It's a unit, made it all the way to Michigan and back, getting like 11.5 or 12 mpg, pulling a 2-car. The big trailer's coming soon. That's the project car update. The reason you guys are all here, we're cleaning out the oil system after my car decided it wanted to explode an oil cooler line and run without oil pressure, and then seize the front stationary gear bearing to the eccentric shaft, to which I had to cut it off to get the rotor out, and that forced me to now fix everything and take it apart unscheduled. But we have improvements to make while we're in there. But I wanted to show you guys this. I did not show you guys this in the last video, even though I had it cut apart in the last video. So this is my oil filter that I have cut apart. So my car has a remote mounted oil filter. It uses a GM size bigger oil filter than stock. And let me tell you, you can see right there, big chunk of aluminum. You can see chunks and chunks and chunks of metal in this filter. So this filter definitely did a good job in catching a lot of oil. Good old Wix parts store filter. You can see here in my rag just how sparkly that is. There's metal everywhere. You can see all the sparkles down there in the oil, just in this that came out of the oil filter whenever I cut it up. There's an old paintball video from whenever I was in high school. This guy bought a used paintball gun, and I've been saying this in my head this whole time.
You gotta be shitting me. There is sand in these barrels. There is sand in these barrels. Oh God, look in there.
Well, I got metal everywhere, not just in my barrel. The metal that's everywhere came from this bearing, the front stationary gear bearing. It spun it right out of the bearing and seized it to the E-shaft, right? And that metal ran through everything. So in the last... Chill. So in the last video, we tore the engine down. Didn't really find anything crazy aside from this. Rotor bearings looked good. Everything looked good. There was some evidence that some larger chunks maybe ran through some stuff, but it didn't take a large toll on any or really all of the bearings besides the front one. So I have another RX8 E-shaft right here. Freaky fresh off the Rad Potential shelf of spare parts from the junkyard, RX8 E-shaft. I also have a set of RX8 stationary gears with used bearings, but usable bearings, if that makes sense. Because we got to put the RX-7 on the dyno in 10 days, and I don't have a press to be able to put bearings in this, and Ernie usually presses all my bearings in at Phalanx Performance. So I don't really think it's, you know, prime time value of our time for me to take my engine there and have him push bearings in it and then try to put the whole car together and put it on the dyno. So ideally, you bring your car to the dyno pre-tested and running. So we're just going to put these used bearings in it. Maybe the engine gets hurt again and we have to rebuild it. Maybe we upgrade it again and I'll go in and change the bearings. I don't think my 1 year or whatever, a little bit I'm probably going to drive this thing before it has to come apart, is going to hurt these bearings. Cleaning the rest of the parts, fairly simple. So, irons housings, got just a nice, clean all the gasket material off, clean all the coolant seal grooves out. I have a video on the channel documenting all the specific parts you need to make sure you get clean when you clean that stuff. So I did all of that. I've got my screwdriver that I cut to fit the coolant seal groove, a little pick, razor blade, get it all cleaned up. Rotors are a little bit of a different story because I'm not fully disassembling these. If you've ever seen me put a set of rotors together before I build an engine on the channel, these little plastic things come in a roll of printer paper if you have a ginormous plotter. So I was a civil engineer. We had a 3-foot plotter, the big rolls. These plastic things come in the shipping boxes. Okay, I've got a couple of them. They work perfectly for assembling a rotor because I can set the rotor on this. The bearing holds it, and the bottom of the rotor does not contact my table. That is important because I still have my oil control rings in my rotors. In a rotary, there isn't really like a oil ring on the piston that distributes oil on the cylinder walls to lubricate it, right? You premix in a rotary. So these oil seals on the side of here, the housing for the ring, the metal casing, right here, you can see the green seal up inside of there. The metal casing rides on the face of the iron, and there's no pressurized oil that's necessarily spraying on this rubber O-ring to contaminate the O-ring per se, okay? Your E-shaft has squirters here, this little nozzle, and here, and those squirters spray oil from the center iron up into the rotor. So the rotor's hollow. So on the non-gear side, it's spraying oil up in there, and that's cooling it off. So I am running the risk with, you know, not fully soaking or ultrasonic cleaning my rotors and leaving my oil control rings in, that yes, there is some potential for some metal to be still up in here. Now, I'm going to hose it out with some brake clean. I want to leave my oil control rings in the rotor, so that's what I'm doing. Is that the perfect, most ideal way to do it? Maybe, probably not. I don't know. I got to get my engine back together in 10 days. So we're going to try to get this thing back together. We'll do a quick oil change. We'll be good to go. As far as cleaning the rotor itself, basically the same process I would do whenever I was building an engine from scratch. So I've been liking to use some sea foam, just a couple drops here. That was a lot and like over here, little Scotch-Brite pad. I like to cut them up small, especially on the rotors. And I've been lightly cleaning. It comes off super easy because this engine hasn't been together for forever. And I just lightly clean all the carbon buildup off of the side of the rotor. I'm not going to worry about the face of the rotor, just the side. I have an old side seal from another engine. It is very important that these grooves are perfectly clean and there's no dirt, dust, debris down in here, and that your side seals, corner seal holes, everything, when you assemble this rotor, that everything moves freely. You don't want to take your engine apart and put it back together and get sand in the engine and then it not work. For me, it's metal shavings in my engine, but sand in the barrels. We don't need that. Could I potentially be making a lot more work for myself? Very much so, yes. But we're willing to accept that risk. My RX-7 has an original 1979-1980 style oil cooler. It's a real nice dual pass, comes in one side, it's got a thermostat built in, fits the front of the car perfectly. These would have actually been mounted under the original factory radiator, so just like an extension of the radiator. Well, these old oil coolers are getting really hard to find, and I have a hard time just throwing this one away because it saw a bunch of metal run through the barrels. So I have set up here a fuel injection pump. This is an EFI pump, just an old one. Hopefully it works. I haven't tested this yet, so y'all get to see live action if I make a big mess of my shop. This bucket was dirty, but the fuel that I put in here was clean, so this is just some gasoline that I pumped out of the old Dodge Colt rally car because it's all taken apart. And I'm going to flush this gasoline through my exploded oil cooler line from this exact setup, and I'm going to run it through this oil cooler backwards, and we're going to see the gas slash metal that's in the barrels come out right here of this fitting, hopefully. When I touch this wire to the battery, hopefully no sparks happen and everything blows up. So let's see how this works. Man, this thing pumps down fast. That was pumping fuel backwards through the oil cooler. So ideally, any sort of metal shavings that were lodged in there, like gold gets lodged in a sluice box, it pushes it backwards out of the thing versus trying to get it stuck in there deeper. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this bucket up again with some more fuel. We're going to run the fuel backwards through it again. Then I'll switch the pump to pump through as if we were pumping oil through this oil cooler, and this thing should be plenty flushed out. You could definitely do this with water, kerosene, diesel fuel, any sort of other, if you have old oil, you could probably try it with that. I just had this old fuel laying around that I really wasn't planning on using anything else, so we just used it with this. So let's make a bigger mess, or ideally not make a mess, and get this oil cooler good and flush. This is a 340 liter per hour fuel pump, so putting out some cleaning power. Hey guys, this is why you mount your fuel pumps inside your tank. Look at how much torque that thing has. The last important thing to make sure is clean is my oil pump. So this is a rotary engine oil pump, chain driven under the front cover. If I can get the drive gear out of here. So what I'm looking for inside the oil pump is this aluminum body, making sure that there's no major gouges up inside here or any metal up inside here. There's two sets of these elliptical pentagonal shaped gears right here. I don't know what the technical term for this gear thing is called, but this one's got 5, the inside's got 4. It spins around in there kind of like a rotor does in a housing, but I can feel some resistance in there. So on the outer ring here, doesn't look like I've got any sort of metal scarring or issues, but you can see just in the sheen there in the light that there's a bunch of dirt and metal on the face of these gears. So typically, I don't like to take these apart, but I'm going to take this apart and clean it. This is a turbo oil pump, and you can tell the difference with your FC turbo oil pumps versus an NA oil pump is the thickness of the pump drive itself, or the pump itself, this piece right here. An NA one is probably about 5 millimeters thinner. It had less of a volume requirement than the turbo oil pump did. stoked the snap ring didn't go flying across my shop and disappear into the abyss. Little guy. All right, now this should all come off, I believe, right? All right, a couple light taps, and I was able to get the main drive shaft out of here. I think I'm going to have to take this big bell gear off to put this back together. But once I've got that out of there, the rest of this, there's an aluminum divider that comes out. Let's make sure that this goes back in the right direction. So I'm going to put it on my towel facing down so that I know that that's the same way it goes back in. And then the center for the second pump side comes out. There's actually a little set screw right here. In there tighter than my screwdriver is strong. Oh, there we go. Okay, so backing that out, slides right out of here. Oh yeah. It's the inside of an RX8 oil pump, guys. Man, just some dirt and metal and stuff in there. So, doesn't look like any of this stuff has any crazy gouges or wear on it. I had one of these blue rags in the vise so I didn't mar up the aluminum pump. That's where this little key was. So, putting this thing back together is probably going to be just a tad bit tricky. What I'm thinking I'm going to have to do, and y'all see this in the next video when we assemble this engine, is I'm going to have to pull this bell gear off and then build this from that circlip up and slide the whole unit into this housing with all the keys in place. All the little pump twirly-doos and their fancy pentagonal elliptical shapes will slide back up in here, and then I can tighten this set screw down, which holds all that stuff, and the set screw lines up in this groove on this centerpiece here. I don't know how important it is that necessarily goes one way or the other. Oh, there's actually there's a shape in the back of the oil pump. You can see that this shape matches, and I think with how the set screw is, it's only gonna fit in there one way, I think. So I can see a little bit of some marring on the side of the oil pump drive, so I don't know that that's a huge issue. I'd have to look. I don't know if I have a spare turbo oil pump. I know I have some like 12A oil pumps, some FC oil pumps, but we're definitely just going to be cleaning this one and putting it back in here. I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. I can feel it a little bit with my finger, but nothing too extravagant. This is the final bits right here, all cleaned up. All this work because of one tiny little bearing. Decided to throw oil in my whole entire engine. We got metal in the barrels. The oil cooler you saw flushed, clean. The nice thing about cleaning it with gasoline or kerosene or something like that is that that stuff will mix with the oil when you run your first cycle of oil change through there versus cleaning it out with water. You might get some water in your oil. They're not soluble. They don't mix, water and oil. So gasoline and oil will mix. So got that flushed out. The oil pan all cleaned up. I hammered all the edges back straight. It's nearly impossible to get an RX8 oil pan off without bending it. So hammered them back straight, ready to go on. Front cover looking a little nicked up and scratched, but all good to go, all cleaned out. I ran the oil pressure regulator through the ultrasonic cleaner and cleaned it out. All the irons and housings and everything, every oil passageway has been blown out with air, cleaned with seafoam, cleaned out. Everything's looking mint, ready to go. Same with the rotors. I blew the insides of them out with air. Remember, we're talking about these oil squirters on the E-shaft. The E-shaft came from a good running engine. It got blown out and just wiped down. Housings, everything looks good. The thing that's interesting, just to show you guys in this video, so I've got rotary aviation super seals in this engine, and maybe I've compression tested it. I don't think I have, but I got some decent wear on this rear housing here. So we've seen this kind of wear before in different engines with different seals. Go check out the Apex seal wear video. Same, this one actually looks really good. So I don't think I resurfaced these when we had this apart. I'm pretty sure we just put the engine back together. The rotary aviation super seals that I put in this engine were brand new, so You know, it's interesting to see this kind of wear already on that. I mean, I've been playing around with different premix rates, but not an excessively different amount, and we've only really driven this thing like, I don't know, 3,000 miles maybe. It hasn't had many miles on it, so I'm interested to see how that holds up. I'll keep an eye on it as we go forward. You know, the car will forever be a project car. This engine will probably come back out for some sort of upgrade or bigger turbo or machine work for dowels or different housings or who knows what. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this and how those rotary aviation super seals are bedding in and tearing up these used housings. So everything else looks super mint though, and I'm very excited to get this thing back together and to get this thing on the dyno. So get fired up for that, because I'm fired up to get this thing back together this week. Like I said, just waiting on my Mazda Tricks order to come in the mail, and I'll have my soft seal kit to be able to put this thing together, plus all the stuff for the hybrid Renesis and the stuff for the yellow RX8. So there's a lot of progress being made on these cars now that we've got the rally car done. And of course, we had to go break basically everything we own before we needed to have it running, just to make everything harder around here. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching the video. I'm happy we got this thing cleaned up. Happy you guys are enjoying the rotary videos. Definitely hit that subscribe button if you want to learn more about this stuff. Go check out the Patreon if you have specific questions about your builds, or you just want to see basically everything that's going on in the back end. I've been working through getting merch stuff going, getting a website set up and all of that. The Patreon guys will have first dibs to any sort of thing that comes out in that regard before I launch it to the main channel and everything. We're cranking it up, and trust me, there's some pretty sweet projects that the Patreon guys know about that weren't mentioned in this video that you guys will love to see if you do check out the Patreon. So much appreciated their support. It made making the transition to doing YouTube and working on cars full time much easier with the support of the guys on Patreon. So definitely couldn't be doing this stuff without you guys watching the videos, without their support on Patreon. And I'm excited to keep it going. So with that, keep it rad. We'll see you guys in the next one. Video coming up soon on what the blue truck's here for. It's going to get a pretty wild, not really crazy transformation, but a pretty good transformation. So if you don't remember this truck, about 5 years ago now, I think, Calvin and I surprise restored this truck for one of my best friends, Charles, down in Tennessee. He's basically who enabled me and taught me a whole bunch about this rotary stuff. It's who I got the RX8 from, formerly known as the Death Trap, and he's had that car for forever. Had this truck for a very long time. We got this thing put together, but the one thing, so this is Mazda winning blue, and the one thing that we didn't do when we painted the truck, because the engine bay paint was black and it was in good shape, is we left the engine bay black. And now we want the engine bay to be blue. So, perfectly good running and driving truck. And I'm going to take it apart so that we can paint the engine bay blue and load it back together. Get excited. Peace.